I've mentioned it a few times in the past, and I'm sure some of you are already aware, but for those who don't know, I went to art school. Specifically, I graduated with my Bachelor of Animation in 2022, so I officially have a degree in drawing funny little pictures. That's how you know I'm a professional, guys. But what was art school like? Was it worth the cost? Was it difficult? Did I learn a lot? Was it worth it in general? And most importantly, did I get a job? That's what I want to talk about today. My time studying animation, the good, the bad, and what I took from it. And to answer that question, no, I did not get an animation job, but that's besides the point. So, let's talk about my experience with art school. Before I properly get started, there is an important thing to be aware of. That is the difference between art school in America and art school in Australia, where I live. In America, many schools require a portfolio submission with your application, and there can be a high skill level that you must have in order to get accepted. Sometimes it seems like you already have to be professional level to even enroll, but regardless, this isn't really a thing in Australia. Since I enrolled, it has become a bit more common, but typically, if you enroll and match the high school grade requirements depending on your state, you'll get accepted in. I think this is because of how universities are set up in Australia compared to the US, but specifically for animation, there is just less of a demand for it. Australia is a small country with an even smaller film and animation industry, so if a university even does offer it, they'd want to get as many students as possible. Additionally, pricing in Australia varies greatly when compared to the States. My degree cost about $18,000 for 3 years, or about $11,500 US. I've heard of courses in America that go for $50K plus, so do keep that in mind if you'd like to go to art school. Since this was across 3 years of my life, and boy, a lot happened during those 3 years. So, in order to keep things concise, I'll break down my art school experience between the parts I loved and the more difficult parts, and we'll alternate between them. When it comes to art degrees and professions related to the film industry, there are two aspects that are most important. One, your skill level, and two, who you know. Networking and being a friendly and good person to work with is very important. Breaking into the industry is incredibly difficult, and no two people get in the exact same way. But if you have a good network of friends and you support each other, persisting in the job market becomes that much easier, and your name will already become known in the industry. Beyond the networking aspect, the people and sense of community was one of the best parts of art school for me. Growing up, I lived in a small town, so I never had friends that shared the same interests as me, and never felt that connected to anyone. I had wanted to get into animation since I was about 11, so I spent the entirety of my teen years working towards that goal. And when it was time for university, I had achieved it. I was able to move over 1,000 kilometers away to study and live on my own. I went from being the quiet kid who had a few friends to suddenly being surrounded by like-minded people. I really made an effort to try and put myself out there and make new friends. Luckily, I did. I started the Discord server for my cohort, lived right next to the campus, so people would often hang out at my building before or after classes. We had dinners together, went camping, and spent countless evenings talking to each other online whilst drawing, doing assignments, or playing games. It was the first time I was able to do a lot of this, and it really meant a lot to me. A lot of my closest friends to this day are still people I met during my time at art school, and they're probably watching this. You know who you are. Yeah, I see you. Josh. However, a lot of that community building was stunted because of a big world event. For reference, I started studying in February of 2020. Do you know what happened a month later? That's right, COVID. So a month after starting classes, settling into things, moving, getting to know people, suddenly it was all over. The thing I had spent years working towards was swept out from under me, and I had to move back home for about 6 months. This was a shock, and my school was not at all prepared for it. Transitioning to online classes was rough. A lot of people ended up leaving, understandably so. At the same time, a lot of professionals were releasing free courses online that were frankly higher quality, so I was even considering leaving too. However, I stuck with it and eventually was able to move back and study in person. Thankfully, lockdowns weren't as long or bad in Australia, but it wasn't until our final year that we had a normal, uninterrupted time without intermittent lockdowns, so it was still difficult throughout. Aside from the online COVID classes, the actual structure of my course was quite good. After the first year, which was mainly introductory classes to film terminology, animation theory, and how to use Adobe and Toon Boom software, we got to pick what roles we wanted to specialize in between 3 majors: art direction, animation, and technical direction. You could then do a second major as electives, so essentially a minor. Personally, I went for an animation major focusing on 2D, and then did electives from the art direction major so I could still do the life drawing classes and improve my 2D illustration and design skills. And then finally, the third year was about studying the industry, how to build our portfolios, and working on our final films in groups. There were also some more niche electives that people could do, such as classes on stop motion, traditional 2D paper animation using lightboxes, a trip to the outback to make a film over 2 weeks, and motion capture classes. Usually, there was also the opportunity for placements or doing semesters abroad, but again, COVID ruined my chances of that. Overall, there was a lot of variety to choose from, and you could really tailor your experience for what you wanted to do, so it felt practical. In addition, the teachers were really good. A good amount of them had industry experience and were very relatable, easy to talk to, and easy to learn from. I'm still in contact with some of the teachers, and some of my friends have even become teachers themselves since graduating. Certainly one of the hardest parts of university for any degree is balancing everything, wanting to do well in your studies whilst also trying to enjoy the social life of being in university, and for most people, living alone and working to afford everything can be really tough. Throw in animation students and it gets even more rough, since most of them are studying something that we did for fun for years and drawing and being something that has no objective way to improve at. We struggle to set boundaries and end up overworking ourselves. Fortunately for me, I lived right next to my university campus, so classes were only a 5-minute walk away. I also was one of the only few students to have never done an all-nighter throughout the course, and I still did pretty good. But a course like this can be really demanding since it's hard to determine when you should turn off from the work, or how you can keep adding things to an assignment. A lot of people struggled with perfectionism throughout. When I wasn't stuck up in rural Australia during COVID, being on campus and in person was great for me. Despite being an introvert that can easily spend a week alone in my room and be pretty content, having a space to go to simply dedicated to work and study really helps spice up my routine and keep me motivated throughout. Instead of sleeping in, I'd sometimes go into uni a few hours early before class and just go into the labs to work on assignments and get some good alone quiet time. Being surrounded by peers really does help you improve your skills. Constantly studying, seeing your friends improve, and being exposed to motivating material really does wonders. At least for me. I feel if I didn't go to university, I wouldn't have made as much growth in my art and as a person. And finally, the job prospects of animation. Well, it's dire to say the least. As I've mentioned, skill isn't all you need to get a job. A lot of it is who you know. So unlike most degrees, an animation degree is far from a promise of getting a job. Most graduates still need a lot of work before they can land a job and are sometimes years off. From my graduating cohort of about 40 people, only a handful of them got a job right off the bat. The animation industry in general is small, let alone in Australia. But unlike America, where a lot of the work is centralized around Los Angeles, the Australian industry is scattered across all of the major cities, which are all about 1,000 kilometers away from each other. And with the nature of animation jobs, the majority of them are contract work, so it's not very realistic to move to different cities every 6 months or so for work. Plus, with the rise of AI coinciding the same year I graduated, finding a job was rough. As for myself, I struggled a lot to figure out what to do post-graduation, and not landing a job. I couldn't help but feel like I failed a bit, that younger version of myself that was originally inspired by Pixar films to study and work in animation. So I kept at it, I kept creating, wound up making YouTube videos, and after spending a few years working post-university, just as regular jobs, I decided against looking for an animation job. The contract terms and type of work that is most common in Australia just isn't really what I'm looking for these days. Now, that doesn't mean my time at university was a waste or that I regret it. A lot of my friends are still involved with the industry through their jobs in studios or teaching, so I'm still connected to it all. For me though, I found that I get creatively fulfilled making videos on YouTube here, and it gives me the most freedom. As for a real job outside of that though, I've been more drawn towards graphic design and illustration. It lines up more with what I've become interested in. It allows me to work across lots of places and for different industries outside of solely entertainment, and allows me to work anywhere easier, which is something that I really value. I don't know what lies in the future for me work-wise. Maybe I'll go back to animation work, but I'd like to incorporate more of it into my videos, just as long as it doesn't kill me trying to get them out at a consistent pace. Without going to art school, I wouldn't have had the opportunities to grow as much as I have, both in my art and as a person, and I certainly wouldn't be where I currently am, and I'm really grateful that I fulfilled at least part of that dream younger me had. I'll keep building my own path in life, and I hope to keep using a lot of the skills and experiences I earned during my time at art school. And there may be times where it's difficult, but it was probably the first major life choice that I stuck to, worked towards, and achieved. Regardless of the result, I don't think I'll ever regret that.